And this is the ayah that a specific kind of Islamic scholars and so-called geopolitical commentators are using to try to put the Muslim ummah in the Russian camp. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام عليك يا محمد. We know the world is getting into a situation of war. There has been a lot of unrest and chaos everywhere, especially in the Middle East. But with the developing situation of what's happening in Ukraine and what's the strategy of Russia, the whole world seems to be concerned about what's happening and what will happen in the future. We have been receiving a lot of questions about this situation, and people wanted us to comment if it is the start of World War III and what should be the strategy of the Muslims moving forward. I usually try not to comment on a situation too early on because unless the whole picture is clear and all of the situation is very clear, and I haven't done my own study and research of the whole situation, I try not to comment just to make sure I'm not commenting something that's too early. Now that we know Russia's strategy and the war that's properly happening in Ukraine, and what's Ukraine doing, what's the response of NATO, and what's happening with the Muslim world in context of this war, I think now it's mature enough so we can talk. I'm not a geopolitical analyst, I'm neither a war analyst, and I don't like to pretend myself as one, and unlike the popular analysts, it's not my habit of pretending to be an expert on everything. So I would avoid talking about the geopolitical scenario and the war, the political aspects of war between Russia and NATO, which is the popular interest right now. I would rather try to keep my focus of the current war in context of Islamic eschatology and in context of the teachings of Quran and Sunnah, and try to explain my point of view about what should be the strategy of the Muslim ummah in context of this developing situation that might lead to World War III. قال الله تعالى في كلامه المجيد in Surah Al-Ma'idah, that's the 5th surah of Quran, ayah number 82. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لتجدن أشد الناس عداوة للذين آمنوا اليهود والذين أشركوا وَلَتَجِدَنَّ أَقْرَبَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا نَصَارَى ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ مِنْهُمْ قِسِّيسِينَ وَرُهْبَانًا وَأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ. This is the ayah that the Muslim ummah is being fed with, and this is the ayah that a specific kind of Islamic scholars and so-called geopolitical commentators are using to try to put the Muslim ummah in the Russian camp. And that's this person, without taking any names, who comes all the way from Southern America to Pakistan and tells that he will settle in Pakistan and spend the rest of his life in Pakistan, and tries to teach people in Pakistan and try to influence them using this specific ayah. And these specific kind of people have been using this ayah of Quran out of context and have been explaining the meaning of this ayah according to their own desires. Before we come to the specific scenario I'm talking about, let's try to understand the geopolitical situation of the current stakeholders in the war. In the recent past, USSR, not too long ago, in the late 90s, USSR dismantled and it became the Russia that we know today. So in the last 3 decades, Russia has been a silent player, a silent observer of the world situation. And after the defeat of USSR, after the dismantling of USSR and it being broken into pieces, and Russia being left over there as relatively less of a power, United States became the de facto international power, the so-called superpower in the world. So United States of America in the last 3 decades made its influence in the world, it established itself in the world as a bloodthirsty China, the superpower that was left behind after the dismantling of USSR, it decided to invade the Muslim countries. They started this like about 100 years ago, but they made these activities even faster. After the 9/11 event, they came invading in Afghanistan. They didn't leave Iraq. They didn't leave Libya, and we know what they are doing in Syria and other parts of the world. So in these 3 decades, it was established that United States is not a friend of the Muslim world. So all of the Muslims of the Middle East, apart from the few countries that are still left, it was mainly known to the Muslims that United States of America is not a friendly country for the Muslims. So American interest in Middle East, like they fulfilled their interest in the Middle East in a way that totally went against the interests of the Muslims. In the same time, Russia kept on collecting its military power, its wealth, and kept on exporting its fossil fuels, gasoline, and others to the West. So in the last 3 decades, it so happened that Russia, that was left after the USSR, as we know, USSR was a communist country, and the basic theme of communism was nauzubillah, they wanted the religion out of this world. They wanted, nauzubillah, as they say, they didn't want the God in control of the world, nauzubillah min dhalik. So they were anti-religion force. They were established as something totally anti-religion. But after the defeat of USSR, the Russia that was left over, it started establishing itself as a Christian country, and they started building churches, and they started promoting pro-Christian activities. And United States, although a Christian country, established itself as a liberal secular country. So what happened in these 3 decades was that USSR didn't bother its neighbors like Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, like other states that were separated from USSR. Russia didn't bother them much, and a very important thing happened at one of the states still a part of Russia. We grew up making duas in our masjids, in our places, in our gatherings for the Chechen movement that was against the Russian atrocities, against the Russian invasion of Russian hold of that part, Russian whole of Chechnya. So we grew up, and the Muslims all over the world grew up making prayers, making duas for the Chechen fighters. But Vladimir Putin was able to make a pact with one of the fighters, that was Ahmad Kadyrov. Ahmad Kadyrov, in as a part of his deal with Vladimir Putin, was able to repel all other fighters, all other legit fighters that were fighting for the independence of Chechnya. So Ahmad Kadyrov made a pact with Putin and practically became a proxy of Russia in Chechnya, and practically oppressing, practically finishing, and repelling all the fighter movements, all of the independence movement, military independence movements that were happening in Chechnya. Ahmad Kadyrov was then killed in a blast or in an attack, and Ramzan Kadyrov, the son of Ahmad Kadyrov, was called over by Putin, and then Ramzan Kadyrov was made in charge of Chechnya. And Putin started funding about 80% of their annual budget. Chechnya popped up as part of the Russian strategy as the poster child of Russia's relationship with the Muslims.